Hello everybody and welcome back to another Walking Dead video. Today we're doing a top 10 list on the worst episodes that came out in 2022 for all of the Walking Dead shows. So that's Fear, Tales and the final season of The Walking Dead. And that's a lot of content. We had about 30 or maybe a bit more than 30, about 30 plus episodes in the Walking Dead universe, and today we'll just listen off the top 10 worst ones we got this year. So let's jump into my honourable mentions, and we have three. We have Fear Season 7 Episode 12, we have The Walking Dead Season 11 Episode 11, and Fear Season 7 Episode 16. These episodes were almost on this list, however I feel like these episodes do have qualities which got them off this list barely. For example, Madison returned. Another thing is I quite liked Eugene in the Eugene episode, which everyone hated. And even though the entire episode was almost garbage, there had little bits in it which made it just barely get off this list. So let's go straight into number 10. And number 10 is The Walking Dead Season 11, Episode 15. And what really sucks about this episode is that you expect so much more from the previous two episodes, episode 13 and 14, really setting things up. And this episode is just kind of Lance walking around, trying to figure things out. There's not really any threats. This episode is just very small scale for being kind of the penultimate episode of Part B. And it kind of really sucked. Like, we do get the setup for the final episode with Leah being recruited by Lance, but it is overall kind of a boring episode. We do get the big F-bomb drop in this episode, but it is kind of boring compared to the episode that comes after it and the two episodes that come before it. It just lacks where it really is. It's just, I didn't really like it personally. Moving on to 9th place, and we have The Walking Dead Season 11 Episode 21, and this is Outpost 22, and I really hate this episode. And the reason why is because it feels like this episode is very cheap. This episode comes basically at the start when the last kind of 3 episodes before episode 24, those episodes really kind of lacked budget, and this episode feels it the most, with our characters kind of just chilling around, not doing much. The one action scene feels quite lazy, and it's like, okay, we have this big train going to this mysterious destination. We don't know anything about this destination. However, this big train goes there, and there's like only maybe a half a dozen soldiers looking after this one working train in the apocalypse. Pretty dumb. We have a terrible chase scene with like shaky cam. Thought that was dumb, and I didn't like how very convenient everything was, like how we had Rosita and Gabriel and Maggie. All those characters conveniently were separated from the main group so they could escape and then join Daryl and Carol and help everyone escape. Personally, I really didn't like this episode, and it just felt kind of cheap, and they're trying to save money for next episodes. The subplot with our people who are being arrested was quite boring. I didn't really like Kelly. It was just kind of very boring, and some characters which would have made sense to be here aren't here. Like, where's Magna? Why is Magna not in this episode? Because they just kind of pair Kelly with Ezekiel, which doesn't really work. I feel like Magna should have taken a role in this episode, and this episode is just way too convenient to me, so it had to be on this list. Now in 8th place we have Fear the Walking Dead Season 7, Episode 13. And this episode is just really dumb and really badly written. This episode really focuses on Sherry and Dwight. And I really don't like Sherry because all she does for the past 2 seasons is talk about how she's not over Negan. And because of her like that, it's just regressed Dwight to be this character which he already kind of developed past. It's really annoying that Sherry's ruined Dwight for me. And Morgan, this episode is really dumb, with Morgan's whole thing in this episode is to be like, I'm gonna leave, even though the past 12 episodes were about Morgan setting up a fight against Strand. He takes Baby Mo and he's like, yeah, I don't care about Grace anymore. I really didn't like it. The Walker plot was a bit dumb, and this episode was just very boring, with characters being like, we're just gonna walk around, don't care about the radiation, not wear masks, have the walkers follow us, have Dwight and Sherry sit inside of a little tunnel, be like, oh, you're pregnant. I just really didn't like this episode, and it just wasn't fun at all. Also, having Wes as the antagonist of this episode is really dumb. This episode annoys me most about West, because this is just after he flip-flops. From episode 11, he just becomes evil, and in this episode, he's trying to kill people that he's known for maybe a year or so, and he's learned to, like, kind of have, like, some sort of companionship with them. He's like, nah, I'm gonna kill you all. Just really hate this episode, and it's really dumb. Moving on to 7th place, and we have Tales of the Walking Dead, Season 1, Episode 4, and this is the episode with the Doctor and the person who cannot survive, even though they're meant to be a survivalist. This episode just has a paper thin plot. I really don't like this episode because of both the female character is very unlikable and very annoying, and she like poisons herself at the start of this episode. Like, she's meant to be surviving in the world. How does she not know what berries she can eat and she can't eat? And then this plot of this episode is, oh, we gotta go find this walker. Female protagonist finds the walker immediately, walks back to the doctor, and then they spend an entire episode to go find the walker a second time when she found it almost immediately at the start of the episode. Really, really dumb. I didn't like the ending of this episode where it's just like, oh, female character runs off and dies, and a male character's like, walkers. And you're like, okay, bruh. This episode has some cool ideas with them being like, this could have been maybe a Walker documentary. I feel like that's what they should have committed to, making this a Walker documentary episode. But they only half-assed it. It was a boring episode, and I really didn't like the protagonists. But moving on to number 6 is another Tales episode. Tales of the Walking Dead, Season 1, Episode 3. And this episode is the Alpha episode. And I really, really don't like the Alpha episode, just because it feels like we don't need an origin that retcons our origin we already have for The Walking Dead. Look at Walking Dead Season 10 Episode 2 for the origin of the Whisperers. Why are we getting a retcon origin, which sucks? Also, I really, really don't like the lack of plot. This episode has maybe 2 stories crammed into one, with Alpha surviving on this boat. Everything goes down on the boat, Alpha and Lydia escape. And the people from the boat that want to kill Alpha and Lydia never show up again. And the back half of this episode is just about them walking around, and Leon talk about how she hears things. And it's about, okay, what's that? Maybe it's people from the boat? No, it's just the Whisperers at a cameo at the end. This episode just needed a bit of a restructuring, and it would have been better. And don't have them be actual Whisperers, but proto-Whisperers. I have talked about this before, that I feel like it's fine having Whisperers, but if they were just maybe covered in guts and not wearing masks, and maybe Alpha introduced the masks, that would have been cooler. It's just this episode, it was just there to be like, here's the new origin for the Whisperers, and it wasn't really planned to be a proper episode. I just really didn't like it. Now, in 5th place is yet another Tales episode, Tales of the Walking Dead Season 1, Episode 6, and this is meant to be the ghost episode, the horror episode, and guess what, it is not scary at all. The plot of this episode, we have protagonist A and protagonist B go to this building. They find a woman, protagonist A kills woman. Protagonist A goes, let's live here. Protagonist B's like, nah, I don't feel like it. Protagonist A is like, yeah, we're living here. They live here. Then we see ghosts. And every time they try and make it scary, they cut away immediately because they're like jump cuts. No, it's not scary. This episode is just really, really, really boring. I don't like how they're ramming ghosts into the Walking Dead universe, then making this all science fiction-y and stuff like that. I didn't like it. I was okay with the Groundhog Day episode because that's just a Mickey, just meant to take the mick, not canon. But this episode's taking itself seriously, and I didn't like it. Maybe if they had it be more ambiguous, is it a spirit or is it not, that would have been cooler. But no, it wasn't. This episode's boring. The protagonists are very unlikable, both of them. And there's a fight scene where baby Jesuses attack protagonist B. I thought this episode was just really dumb, really stupid, and it wasn't a good way to kind of end the mediocre Season 1 of Tales of the Walking Dead. Moving on to 4th place, we have The Walking Dead Season 11 Episode 19, and this is the episode we get introduced to the variant walkers. And I really, really didn't like this episode because even though the episode is called Variant and we introduced the variant walkers, they're the plot B of this episode. The main plot of this episode is just about Eugene just hiding. That's the episode. Eugene hiding, everyone trying to hide Eugene, but Eugene deciding it's best to hand himself in because it will help his family and friends and stuff like that. And I really, really didn't like it. I thought it was very dumb, and this episode ends with our characters being arrested. I just really didn't like the episode with our characters just kind of, oh, let's hide Eugene for 45 minutes when it should really be a plot B. This episode just feels like the plot B and plot A were flipped, when the plot B should have been the plot A. The main part of this episode should have been the variants, and it really annoys me that the episode is named after variants. It introduced the variants, but the variants are not important to the story. And this should have been the episode where we had our characters and maybe one of Aaron's group dies. Maybe Lydia gets bit in this episode, not in episode 23. And this is the episode where the variants really show themselves in force, and it should have been maybe a horror episode. A lot like episode 6 of season 11. That is what we should have got for this episode. But no, it is just like characters hiding and Pamela looking for Eugene. And I thought that was very boring. The plot B is interesting, but the plot A really annoys me. There are some funny bits of Eugene, but I really didn't like it. This episode could have been cut in half, really. Now let's move on to third place, and this is Fear the Walking Dead Season 7, Episode 10. And this is the Charlie episode, and I'm really surprised that this wasn't number 1. However, you will soon find out what number 2 and number 1 is, but this episode is terrible. The acting is terrible, and the stupid romance in this episode with a new character, Ali, and we have Charlie, and I really don't like the dialogue. The dialogue in this episode is abysmal, with them like kind of shoehorning the characters' ages to be like Charlie saying, "I'm 13 last week," and this guy going, "I'm 13 this week," or something like that. I just really thought the dialogue was terrible, the acting was terrible, and the love story just dumb, really dumb. It's all stupid, and then the stupid death at the end, just to be like, oh no, I'm sad. However, this episode does have some massive positives. First of all, Charlie has been given a terminal illness, and she is now going to die, which is great. We're about to get rid of Charlie. Second of all, I really like the sets. I really like they have this episode take place in a city. We get radioactive walkers in a city area, which is cool because we normally get them in generic wasteland 1, which is orange, or 2, which is green, but no, we have a city. So this has really cool sets. It's like Last of Us vibes. So there is some really cool things. I really like John Dory in this episode, and I really like Strand's little minion guy, Howard. Those two really carry this episode, but this episode is almost number 1 until these next 2 episodes happen. So let's move on to number 2, and we have Fear the Walking Dead, Season 7, Episode 15. This is the 100th episode, and the goodbye to Alicia. And this episode is so much worse than Charlie's episode, because the story is completely nonsensical this entire episode. Even though I hate the last episode, the episode had a plot. This episode is just Alicia having illusions, just going, I'm delusional, and going to one place, going to another place, passing out when it's generic. And then we have her going back to the tower, saving Strand magically. Everyone accepting to save Strand, even though Strand basically kind of almost tried to kill everyone else. And then she just goes, oh no, I'm not too well. I will turn if I get on that boat. And then everyone wavers away. She collapses. Everyone on the boat who can still see her goes, nah, we're not going to go save her. It's Alicia. And then she wakes up. And what's this? She's better suddenly. What's the point of getting off that boat if you're just going to get better? I just really didn't like this episode. Alicia's goodbye was botched. She should have died. And the writers, even though they're terrible, at least they don't act like Angelo Kang, and who's too scared to kill off a single character. The Fear writers at least kill off characters quite a lot. Why do they not kill off Alicia? I really don't understand that. I really don't like the Alicia passing out constantly story, and then our characters being like, oh, this character who cannot stay 10 minutes conscious, we're going to let her go into this building alone where she's probably going to pass out, and we're just going to sit here like sitting ducks until that building explodes and we all die. I just really thought everyone was moronic in this episode. It was a really dumb episode. Now, at number 1, the worst episode we got in the Walking Dead universe in 2022 is Fear the Walking Dead Season 7, Episode 9. And I remember watching this episode because it came out the same day as Episode 10, which is the Charlie episode. And I remember watching it, going in and going, okay, we know our Charlie episode is Episode 10. They obviously put this with Episode 9 because everyone hates the Charlie episode. No, the Charlie episode is the better one of the two because this episode has no plot. Alicia is super annoying in this entire episode, and we get a deaf character in this episode. However, they seem to forget he's deaf at points. I remember watching this, and we see the character stating to Alicia, I need to see your mouth to be able to talk to you. And there's scenes, especially in like the action-paced scenes, where Alicia's like looking out the window talking, and the deaf guy can clearly know what she's saying and responding. Like, mate, you're meant to be deaf. You're meant to be going, I can't hear you, turn around and look at me so we can have a conversation. I really didn't like it. Alicia kept passing out in this episode again, because that was Alicia's thing in part B of season 7. Pass out here, there and everywhere because it's convenient. I really didn't like. I feel like this episode is where the trick became very clear, is where they introduced new characters in Fear just to kill them off in the same episode, and they introduced a cool kind of deaf character, even though when they forget he's deaf, but when they remembered, he could have been a very interesting character, maybe a Luke-like character, because he did like music, and he had, maybe you could use him as a kind of Luke and Connie hybrid, and you could do some cool scenes of him like they did with Connie in season 9, but no, he just suddenly dies off. And the main villain in this episode, Arno, is just really dumb, not villainous or scary at all. He just comes across like a weasel, not really knowing what he's doing. He's being beaten by a girl who's dying and has one arm, and a deaf guy. How is he losing these fights when he has more men, and these two people just come out of nowhere, whack him? I'm pretty sure Alicia beats him up in one scene with one arm because her arm gets detached. I feel like this episode is just really dumb. I really didn't like it. It was very boring, very slow paced, and this episode definitely needed maybe a second plot just to kind of help us get through this episode. There definitely wasn't enough story, and I don't really remember what the purpose of this episode was. It was like, okay, Alicia passed out, and then she got to a barn. We saw this mystery thing which got answered in episode 15. Turns out it was hallucination of your younger self, so it doesn't answer anything. This episode just doesn't make any sense, and why would our group let Alicia go off by herself in the first place? Like, our group is just very dumb. With our group knowing Alicia's sick, why on multiple occasions are they letting her run off by herself, pass out, and then not go bother finding her, just to wait for her to come back eventually? It's just really dumb. And I really hate this episode. I'd rather rewatch the Charlie episode than this one again. And that's because there's just more likeable characters in the Charlie episode, and even though I really hate the acting in the Charlie episode, this episode doesn't have great acting either, and at least the Charlie episode has some sort of plot. This plot is just kind of a bit boring, because Alicia breaks something and the deaf guy's like, you gotta help me now, and Alicia's like, okay, yeah, I'll help you. It's just really dumb, but this is just my list, remember that? But please tell me down below, do you agree with my list, or do you disagree? And if you disagree, tell me what your top 10 worst episodes of 2022 are down below. Give me a little reason why as well, of why you hate these episodes. But this is it for me today. So if you want more Walking Dead content, please look on the screen. I do recommend you click on something, because you'll find something you'll like, guaranteed. If not, come back here and tell me that you didn't find anything else, because I clearly ain't doing something right. But make sure to like and subscribe to the channel to help out and keep up to date with all things Walking Dead. 2 videos a week, every week. But that's it for me today, so goodbye, peace out, and I'll talk to you at a later date.